All right, hey
Hello.
everybody.
Hello, hello.
We are live.
We're live. I was going to try and stream it to my channel, but I totally forgot, so I'm not going to. Whoops.
Do you not have the option at this point?
I don't know. I don't even know how to do it. I'm such a Luddite. I
I
think
think.
that.
Do
Sorry.
you see a up in the upper right is like? Do you see your
My little
little
face.
avatar? Yeah.
Yeah.
If you click on that, there should be a drop down, and one of
Mm-hmm.
them may be if you're on your account, you should be able to stream
Don't
from
worry
your.
about it. I'll see
Okay.
if I can do it, but for the time being, it's fine.
Okay.
So my laptop is no longer in service.
Oh no.
So I'm on my iPad, which like mostly works. But like trying to get everything, like all the stuff up and running is a new experience. So,
Yeah. Well, now your screen went black.
oh, good. Sorry, I'll come right back. I'm trying to log into my account to
Oh,
make
okay.
to
Okay.
see, but honestly, at this point, it might not even be worth it. That's fine. Let's go back to what I was doing. All right. Oh, what? Yeah, that's okay. We're not going to do that. We're done. It's fine. It's fine. Sorry, everyone. Let's go for it.
All right. So, how has your semester been going?
It's been going. No, it's been good. This semester I am taking a text course with Dr. Stackert on Second Isaiah, and so basically, for those that might not know, we read it in Hebrew and then we translate and we dissect it grammatically, as well as thematically and everything else. But that class, I am taking a class with Dr. Chevelle on biblical law, and
Ooh, that's cool.
it's actually, yeah, it's really interesting. And it's something that I hope we can talk about a little bit
Yeah.
as we progress. And I'm taking a class called Guardians of Knowledge about like scribes and manuscripts. So it's in the special collections area of our library, and it's taught by Dr. Tarayas Tovar,
Okay.
she studies like Greek papyri, I think. So later than like most of what I study, but still a very interesting class. I got to take a look at a 13th century pocket Bible today.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, like all handwritten by many different hands, and it looks uniform across the entire thing, which is really quite something.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I
it's going good.
saw a little like tiny miniature Bible from somewhere around well, no, it was probably 1700s in the library in the cathedral in Exeter when I was there, because Francesca was like, we're going to go take a look at the behind the scenes
Yeah.
they've got down there. Welcome to the chat, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Hi, Chrissy. Thank you so much. I hope you're doing well. We are going to...
I'm going to grab a book to put my computer on, but I'm here.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Jonathan LaForge, thank you so much for the super chat. I was on Bible Hub today looking at Genesis 1:1 to see if any Bibles translate the verse more accurately, as you explained in one of your videos. When God created, why are all of them translating it in the beginning? Bible Hub is mostly older translations, more traditional translations, and they're overwhelmingly going to be translating it like that. It's the more modern ones, the NRSV UE Alters translation, the JPS Tanakh, the translations from the last few decades. So Jessica and I are going to talk a little bit about some stuff that she's been reading and some other stuff, and then we'll take questions and things like that maybe for the last little bit.
I'm in a Slack group with a number of the other like Hebrew Bible students, and also Dr. Chevelle and Dr. Stafford and all of that, which is very strange. But I told them I was doing this live stream later, so I had them throw a couple of questions in. So I have some questions from some students, and like a PhD student who asked to remain nameless on air, so you shall, and one from Dr. Chevelle. So
cool.
Yeah.
That'll
So,
be fun.
to maybe lay the groundwork a little bit, as promised, this stream, as mentioned, is going to be largely about the cognitive science of religion. So, before we really get into it, maybe you can give a quick summary of what the cognitive science of religion is, and then I'll kind of talk about what I'm looking at, the time period I'm looking at, which I think actually very nicely overlaps with the time period you looked at in your book. So,
Okay, awesome.
let's do
So,
it.
cognitive science of religion, or CSR, is an approach to trying to understand this thing that we label religion that started with, I think, late 80s, early 90s is when people started trying to apply neuroscience, cognitive psychology, evolutionary psychology, these fields of study to understanding religion. And it kind of started with concepts of deity. I think there's a famous book by Stuart Guthrie called Faces in the Clouds from around 1990 that is kind of gets the ball rolling on this new theory of religion, where it talks about how humans are evolved to detect agency in the world around them, and many other animals also are evolved to do that, and that this is kind of the cognitive spark for the development of deity concepts. And then as that research, which is engaged in experimentation with humans, with other primates, they do all kinds of very fascinating work on how all kinds of different animals seem to understand agency in the world around them. But then we had ritual theory kind of join the game as well, and talking about how human society has evolved some of the features of some of the features that are now central to this thing that we call religion. And I talk about this a lot when I talk about costly signaling, credibility enhancing displays, pro-sociality. These are things that allowed human societies to grow in size and complexity while maintaining social cohesion. And so ever since then, this field has been developing and trying to gather more empirical data to help us better understand how evolution and the universal experiences of being human and all these kind of bottom-up factors interact with culture, social frameworks, and all these top authority and all these top-down features to result in what the things we now label religion. And it is the field is getting broader and broader. There are different theories within it. There's a lot of different stuff going on. I am right now a co-chair of one of the SBL program units the SBL program unit that looks at cognitive science of religion and its relationship to the biblical world. And we've got some fascinating papers that are going to be presented in San Diego about this. So,
Ooh.
Yeah, excited for the future.
I mean, not a bad place to have a conference either.
San Diego's the big one. That's the one that everybody saves up for and makes sure not to miss.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think about exactly how I want to phrase all of this, but I think that it might be worth saying that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the time period that you work with in your book is like the first millennium BCE.
Yeah.
And largely the time period that I'm working with is the first millennium BCE.
Right.
But a little bit differently. So I'm looking at the first millennium BCE, but leaning a lot more heavily into the Mesopotamian context.
Right.
That sort of there you are. That the Judahites were in and the texts were written and all of these fun things. And so for those in the chat, you may all know this already, but it's worth, just briefly going over. There was the Israelite kingdom, there was the Judahite kingdom. The Israelite kingdom was in the north, Judahite was in the south. Israel was basically destroyed in the 702, 705?
722.
722, thank you. So most of what I work with or study at the moment has to do with the Kingdom of Judah and its interaction with Babylon. More broadly, I work a lot or read a lot and research a lot about the Neo-Assyrian Empire, which fits into that sort of first millennium BCE. So that's just the basic, I don't know, groundwork for what I think what we'll be mostly discussing this evening.
All right.
All right. So some of this will be more specific. Some of this are things I'm still trying to work out.
Mm-hmm.
I read all of the articles you sent me. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten through all of the books, as you might imagine. Yeah, not for lack of trying, but the 9-week quarter system here doesn't leave me a lot of free time. I have been thinking sort of to varying degrees of success about identity formation of a people under sort of or in the shadow of empire, and how we can use cognitive frames to better understand the ways in which maybe like these texts emerged, or the ways in which these people could have conceptualized themselves, things of that nature. So that's what I'm thinking about broadly. I'm trying to narrow it down, but you know, that's how it goes. I'm also, and this is where the biblical law comes in, thinking about how tradition gets, what is the word I'm looking for? Not transferred. Well, I guess transferred, but like through time, especially as it relates to legal edicts like or I guess royal edicts such as the Anduraru, and how they would have eventually found their way from the old Babylonian period down into the Neo-Assyrian period, where we see them show up in sales documents and things like that, but less so from the documents of the kings themselves. So that's kind of all over the map. But that's sort of what I'm thinking about. Thoughts?
So like identity formation and things like that. And, you know, when you look at, it's been a while since I've looked at anything related to Mesopotamia, but I know Seth Sanders and Sergei Omer have talked about identity formation as it relates to the development of writing and how writing becomes a means of identity formation. I'm trying to think. I don't know that if there's anything within the cognitive science of religion that has already looked at that kind of thing. Yeah, well, and you know, that was kind of my problem as well with my book, is that I had seen a little bit with cognitive linguistics and concepts of deity, but primarily with Mesopotamian literature, and so nothing on the Bible, and so I was kind of having to break new ground. Hang on just a second, my 6-year-old is looming.
Oh, please go ahead. Looming. I so many books. I covered my book with my phone with my book, which is where I'm like jumping into the chat to say hi to people.
Yeah.
But sorry.
Yeah, he's been on one recently.
You will appreciate this if no one else. Stacker handed me this today. I don't know if you can read it. I
can't.
Kierkegaard and Lambden, Harvard University Semitic Philology 140 from 1994. Really incredibly useful and what I was looking for, but it's kind of funny. I was like, who would appreciate this? Dan will appreciate this.
Yeah.
So in regards to what you were saying about the Mesopotamian context, we actually are just about to jump into Isaiah 46 in our Deutero-Isaiah class, which has to do with this polemic. Well, it's a part of a larger polemic against idols and this, that, and the other, but especially idols. In 46, we have, I believe it's Baal and Nabu, being
They're being carted around and
yeah, and like being prostrated in front of, theoretically anyway, in front of Yahweh. And so I've started sort of diving into this because I'm writing my exploratory paper on some part of this. I'm not sure yet. But from what I've gathered, this would have been part of like the Akitu festival, which would have the actual gods themselves. They'd come out, they'd like take them around the temple or wherever they took them around, and then they'd put them back inside, like taking the gods for a walk.
Right.
And so as I got further into this, I came across, so as I was reading like Isaiah 44 today, I was thinking, okay, well, the author is like railing against like, oh, you use the same wood and the same fire to like make your gods. Like, how is this possible? And I was like, well, I guess, I don't know, did the Israelites or the Judahites not have some special wood? And then I realized I don't think they had idols at this point, or it was kind of murky. We don't know when they, I guess, went in and out of style. But it led me to I think it's the Mispi rituals, or where the mouth washing. So where they effectively ritualized or did a ritual to their idol, which was very drawn out.
Mispi and
where there we go.
Washing of the mouth and the opening of the mouth. Right,
where or the person who made the idol would be like, I did not make this idol.
Right.
I did not make this.
You have the ritual cutting off of their hands, where they say, I didn't make this. And the God made this. Born in heaven,
Dan,
made
I'm pretty
on
sure I
earth.
saw you made it.
So do you have Michael Dick's work on this?
No, but I will.
I can. Okay, I'm going to show you a couple books actually.
Well, of course, my pens are over there. I'll put it in my notes.
And right, I'm going to go ahead and share yield screen here. So this.
Oh, there we go.
This is the Born in Heaven, Made on Earth: The Making of the Cult Image in the Ancient Near East. From '99. It's a little older. It's an edited volume, but there's a lot of great stuff. Prophetic parodies of making the cult image. You have the induction of the cult image. That's the Mispi ritual. Theology of cult statues in Egypt. And then there's one about contemporary South India and cult statues. So this was really helpful for me working on this kind of thing. Hang on just one second.
Yeah. While he's doing that, I saw somebody ask who Nabu is, and he was a Babylonian god of many things, but like wisdom, learning, and probably about 57 other things, because that's how those gods worked.
Two books that I also found helpful, and and I'll just show you this other one. Cognitive Perspectives on Israelite Identity. This might be a good book for you. Where, let's get to the... So, yeah, classification and categorization in the human sciences, blah, blah, blah. This is from 2010, so there's stuff that's more up to date.
Sorry, what was the title one more time?
Cognitive Perspectives on Israelite Identity. I think that one will probably be helpful for you as well. So my Hebrew instructor at Oxford, Stephen Herring, his doctoral dissertation was published as Divine Substitution, Humanity as the Manifestation of Deity in the Hebrew Bible in the Ancient Near East. And so talks an awful lot about these rituals, the washing of the mouth, the opening of the mouth, and stuff like that. Okay. And then Catherine McDowell's book, The Image of God in the Garden of Eden, the creation of humankind in Genesis 2:5 through 3:24, in light of Mispi, Pit P, and also the Whippet rituals of Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt. So that's also going to
amazing
talk at length about that process. But yeah, I think there's an awful lot in there that can help contextualize what's going on. Mark Smith also did one, wrote a paper about the cult polemics.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you have access to that, but I can send you that as well.
I mean, I'm sure I have access to a lot through the library. I just have to check, and every time I check, my screen goes black. I mean, every time I I'll check later.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And hey, David, good to see you. Hope you're doing all right.
Yeah.
And for those in the chat who are asking, yes, I do have a Discord. It's associated with my Patreon. So if you, yes, subscribers get access to that. And actually, I should probably have that open because there's a live stream channel on there, and folks are supposed to have priority on there. However, because this is more of a discussion between us rather than an open,
right.
Okay. I'll just have that open just in case anybody does chime in there. So you're enjoying the discussion of Isaiah 46?
I am. So I was reading through the intro, or I think it was either the intro or the first chapter of your book again today as I was sort of getting ready for this. And you mentioned, I think the phrase was something along the lines of the Judahite maturation under Assyrian hegemony. And this stuck out to me because I think that like it's right in there that I'm trying to pull something out of.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet, but like that's the idea. I was reading Mark Luchter's intro to his new book. I'm not sure if it's out yet or not, but he in his introduction talks about how humans understand themselves or have perception based on the world around them and their relationship with other people, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I was hoping you would expand on that since he cites you.
I heard that he had you told me about that?
It was me. Yeah.
Okay.
I was reading the intro and I was like, "Hey."
Well, I'm flattered. And hang on just one second. I wonder if I can put this in the. Can you put files in the chat or no?
I don't know. Probably not. Well, actually, I don't know. You might be able to as a host, or you might be able to put a link to like a whatever it is, Dropbox or whatever you use.
Let's see. Yeah, that's not going in there. Okay, I'll have to. A very, very generous person on my Discord created a reading list based on books that I've recommended on social media. And grouped them according to topic, and even color-coded them according to how accessible they consider them to be. And so I've kind of edited it a little bit, and I'm sharing it on the Discord. I'll have to post that online somewhere. I keep meaning to, and unfortunately get distracted. Philip North says, "How can we support HQ, who is doing the Lord's work and promoting the best band ever?"
That's a good question. I mean, however you want. I don't know. I guess also this might be worth mentioning for people. I just assume everyone knows this, but not everyone knows it. For those of you that are like, who is this person talking to Dan? I'm currently doing a master's, basically Hebrew Bible, Ancient Near East, whatever, here in Chicago. So that's why we're talking about all of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So so the question is Mark's reference to how people understand themselves in relation to people around them. And I talk about that in a little bit of detail in, I think it's probably, so the section in my book on personhood starts on page 26. And I get into ancient personhood by page 29. My dissertation actually goes into a lot more detail. So I had to cut out a bunch for the book. But if you're willing to wrangle with the technical stuff in there, let me pull up my dissertation and see. where all that is, because I think I have a whole chapter on personhood.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, chapter 2 in my dissertation, which is almost 80 pages.
Okay, great.
Is all about personhood. And I have agency and cognition and evolution, agency and anthropology, personhood in today's society. Excuse me. So I talk about Melanesia and South India and North America and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then personhood in ancient Southwest Asia. So.
I remembered the thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it ties into this. And I'm gonna like I know for a fact I don't know how to pronounce this person's name, and I'm sorry in advance. Homi K. Baba?
I don't know. Is that a first name, a middle initial, and a last name?
Yes. It's a first name, middle initial, last name. He writes like about post-colonial theory, and his sort of, I mean, he's done a lot of really good work, but the relevant sort of salient point to what we're talking about is he talks a lot about this like third space, which is like where a subject's population is, or their collective identity is sort of redefined depending on where it sits on the power continuum, where it sits in physical space between which countries, how powerful those countries are, and the norms that sort of emanate from whoever has the power and control over them, and then how they respond to that. Which is interesting and complex, and I'm still working through it in my own brain, so I apologize for not having, a ton of like great thoughts on it. But I think it's worth thinking about, I guess, that third space, or is it Victor Turner who talks about it in like ritual theory, when you're sort of in between these two spaces and your identity is neither there and it's neither here and it's not there. It's this third thing. And I think it's very much in the same way when you are an independent people group, say, and then you are not any longer. You are now under the thumb of somebody else. Yeah. And there's that transitional space where, kind of regardless of how much you want to protect and maintain your own individual identity, it's almost impossible, because we form our identities based on the people around us, what's imposed on us, and how we perceive the world around us, basically.
Yeah, I think when you're put in a position of like forced migration, of exile, it's disrupted your identity, and now you're in this liminal space.
Right.
And you're forced to kind of renegotiate your identity, and you don't really have a choice but to do so in relation to the other power that is exercising hegemony. And so, yeah, I think that's. I looked up this. He's the Ann F. Rothenberg Professor of the Humanities at Harvard, an Indian scholar and critical theorist. I'd be interested in reading what he has to say about that, because that absolutely has relevance to what you're looking at in terms of Babylonian exile.
Yes. Also, I did not randomly find this. Shout out Mark Lucher. It's I found it from his work here.
So he cited me and then this guy. That's embarrassing for me, but
no, that's great. Yeah, so I guess, and I think I've kind of already said this, but this is me trying to pull out ideas and regurgitate things that I've been thinking about. So the kingdom of Judah would have been responding, I think, both to the empire that they were, for a period, living in the shadow of, and then for a while living under the thumb of, But before that, they would also be responding to the destruction of the Northern Kingdom,
Yeah.
which isn't, I mean, it's empire adjacent, because you saw that this this empire has, you know, since wiped that off the face of the earth, basically. I mean, not exactly, but more or less. And while Jerusalem wasn't really destroyed until significantly later, you have to imagine that this loomed somewhat large over the Judahites.
Oh, absolutely.
So I've also been thinking about the way in which these anxieties shape behavior and shape what is being talked about. Because, you know, what's interesting, and I apologize if I'm jumping around a bit, but when you read texts, I believe, like, is it Deuteronomy 4? Deuteronomy something, where it's like all of these rules and like, oh yeah, you have to have a king. You can't have a king that's a foreigner. And it's like, well, why would you say that? Like, where in, maybe it wasn't Deuteronomy, I'm sorry, but like
it's Deuteronomy 17, because in Deuteronomy 18 you have the prophet like unto Moses, and the chapter right before that is talking about how you will draw your king from among your brethren, and not from any non-Israelites.
Right. And you have to ask yourself, not you, Dan, but me, why in the world would they say this? Why would somebody write this down? Was there ever a non-native king here? Like, it's no. So the sort of working assumption is that, like, in the marketplace of ideas, this was something that was going on. This was something that people were concerned about. Mm-hmm. And if that's really, like, if no one's worried about it, why are you writing it down? You're not going to write it down. And so, like, you see these conversations sort of pop up into the text in like little spots. And at least in my mind, it gives us an interesting insight into what these people were worried about. And I know that there are a number of scholars who don't think that we can use sort of modern studies or concepts or these things to look at the past. And I understand that when you're working with a data set, or we're working with a data set today, we're working with living, breathing human beings, mm-hmm. and we're then dealing with people that are long dead. But as you so aptly note, our brains are the products of a long process of like evolution. And humans during this time period and humans now on the grand scale of this evolution are quite close.
Yeah.
And so I actually think that those people probably weren't vastly different from us.
Yeah. Certainly on in terms of the fundamental kind of cognitive architecture, there's no appreciable difference. And obviously the social structures anciently and a lot of the top-down influences differed, but in the broad outlines, you know, we're dealing with a lot of those universals of human experience. And so I think we can use the results from experimentation and research using living informants to help fill in the gaps on what we can't ask the ancients about how they were feeling.
Yeah, and Kip mentions that there was a power vacuum, which is a very important point.
And this is one of the things that the Judahites do, is try to appropriate the identity of the North, take the traditions and gin up this notion of later on this notion of a united kingdom. But there's another book that I just thought of that may be helpful for you, and it is, I'll share the screen real quick.
Assyrians created a lot of anxiety. Their royal family was crazy. Yeah, I've been working my way through what is it? Esarhaddon, Sennacherib, who is and Sargon, And well, I guess Sargon, Esarhaddon, Sennacherib. No, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon. I can't remember, but so I'm getting this mixed up. But I was just reading about this the other night in Eckhart Fromm's most recent book about Assyria, and how sorry, I totally hijacked this.
No, go ahead.
How there was this belief in ancient Assyria, ancient Babylon, that basically your dead need to be interred underground. And I know there was variation in burial practices and all of this stuff, but the foundational belief that, like, if you died, you needed to be buried underground was relatively universal. And I believe it was Sargon first, Sargon II, that takes off, to do a military campaign. It is not successful, and his body also does not come back. They don't recover it. It's gone. Which is a really big problem back in Assyria, because they think that if they can't bury you and put you underground, that you will basically find the people that you knew in life and haunt them, and bring misery and sickness and ultimately death. And so when word gets back to, I should really look at my notes because I'm getting upset that I can't remember the order this goes in. Sorry, bear with me. Sargon. Where is it? Yeah, Sennacherib. Sorry, it's Sargon, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon. Apologies. Sennacherib is so freaked out by the fact that his father's body was not recovered that, like, he actually tries to erase every memory of his father that he can find. Won't talk about him. Did not go to therapy. And at least from what Fromm says, there are glimpses where he seems to have almost like he's like, I don't want to call them psychotic, not psychotic, but they have these very serious mental health symptoms, it would seem. Obviously, we can't diagnose the past. I wasn't there. We don't know. But we have records of him becoming just so enraged frequently that people didn't want to talk to him. And then, Sennacherib dies a pretty untimely death as well, when his sons, or a number of his sons, and some other people and at least one of his sons, kill him unceremoniously.
Yeah.
So eventually Esarhaddon takes the throne and takes a different sort of tack than his father. But we also see in a lot of the texts that Esarhaddon seems to have struggled with things like depression, or things that look like depression, right? I don't know if it was depression. So all of that to say, these aren't even the craziest of the royal family in Assyria. They were wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry.
That's all right. So Aaron Darby's book from 2014, Interpreting Judean Pillar Figurines, is wonderful just in relation to the study of Judean pillar figurines. But the subtitle is Gender and Empire in Judean Apotropaic Ritual. And she talks in one of the chapters about the influence of Assyrian hegemony on Judea.
Oh, great.
In the late pre-exilic period and into the I think it's mainly in the late pre-exilic period. So that would at least model for you what those discussions are like.
Yeah, that would be great.
It's in more direct relation to Judean pillar figurines. So, yeah.
This sounds familiar. I definitely haven't read it, but I think I may have mined a bibliography and seen this in there.
Yeah. And then from the Discord, Vishanti says Richard Friedman's book, Who Wrote the Bible, goes into a lot of cult centralization and reaction in Northern Kingdom destruction, influencing the Judahite identity / priestly structure. So that's more of a trade book than an academic one, but that's.
Yeah. Is this the one that's, no, this is, sorry. The one I'm thinking of is like with sources revealed.
Yeah, the
That's, like,
Bible with
not
sources revealed.
hot,
That's
not
a
good.
different one.
Yeah, sorry. We just had this conversation the other day. I think what Vashanti's talking about is not the one I'm talking about.
Yeah. And then Simone Bat Yochai says that Jeffrey Stackert, in his book, raises questions about the efficacy of the centralization/reforms as an ideological function within the textual tradition. It's definitely a thing, but how effective it was on the ground is questionable. And that fits into like Jonathan Adler's thesis that this stuff isn't widely known, much less enforced until probably 2nd century BCE at the earliest. And so this is all operating on a more elite level, whether as literary scribal exercises or structuring power on an elite level. But yeah, it certainly was limited.
Yeah.
And even on Darby's work on Judean pillar figurines shows that these figurines are pretty much, they continue right into the exile. There's like no sign that anyone ever came and started taking them away or shut them down. So
I think both Stackert and Chevelle at different points, I'm trying to remember who, I don't know. I told this to them. It's like mom and dad. Like that's like, I go back and forth between their offices, like asking questions, not like confirming, like I think one of them is wrong, but like an idea will like marinate in my head for a while and then I'll like take to the other. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, you want to have different perspectives on this.
Yeah. And I'm a slow thinker, I think. Like I need time to like let it set in. And then as it sets in, the idea or the whatever, then I'll take it to the other person and say like, hey, Stackert said this or Chevelle said this, and I'm thinking this. What do you think? But yeah, anyway, that like, they've posed the question to me and to the class several times, like, who's reading this? Like, who's reading this? And I don't I don't know. But like, the thing is they don't know either, right? Like none of us really know. Yeah. But chances are, and I think they compared it to, I don't know. One of them compared it to being an academic and presenting a paper at a conference where it's like you could have the best idea ever. You present it at the conference and your 12 friends all clap very loudly for you, and that's so great. And like the rest of the world never hears it, doesn't care, and like is not applying it. Yeah. So, and that's not to say that's how all of these are.
Like that stings a little bit. It's true, but he didn't have to say it.
I mean, he didn't have to go that hard.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I feel this way often. Like they don't pull any punches, which I appreciate. But like, dang, you have to just like take it down a notch.
You mentioned going back and forth between Chevelle and Stackert's offices. Mm-hmm. That reminded me of today. We recorded an episode of the Data Over Dogma podcast today. We talked with David Carr.
Nice.
And we talked about the primeval history. Awesome conversation. I had so much fun. It was so great. And he talked a bit about Genesis 2:17, and he was saying that he thinks that God says you will definitely die, and then the fact that they they were robbed of immortality, and so that's exactly what God said would happen. And I wasn't going to push back at all in this discussion because I've been going hard on the whole God lied side of things, which
I'm sure the internet loves that.
And there are a bunch of
I'm sure everyone's having a totally normal response to that.
Yeah. And I'm not alone in the scholarship. Plenty of scholars have said that. Even
that's what the Bible says.
Well, but particularly related to Genesis 2:17, because even James Barr says, and like nobody messes with when James Barr says this is what the text means. That's what the text means. But he was saying that what God said would happen didn't happen. But he argues that this is kind of like a compassionate parent who like doesn't want to follow through with this punishment. However, we every episode we do a little after party 25-minute thing.
Oh, cute. I mean,
when we have guests, we always say you're welcome to join us, but we don't expect it of you. And he joined us, and the first thing that Dan Beecher said, my podcast co-host, was, "Now Dan thinks God lied in Genesis 2:17." And I was like, "Hey man, you don't got to make us fight."
Gee, I was just trying to have fun. That's funny. That's funny. Yeah. I don't know if this will ever come to fruition, but I made Stacker promise that I'd be the first channel he came on for YouTube.
Oh, really?
Which he was happy to agree to, because he knows I'll be in school for at least the next 7 years. So he's like, "Yeah, sure, yeah, whatever."
So I should not invite him on the podcast then?
No, I mean, you can invite him on the podcast. I just said YouTube.
Just not YouTube? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you can invite him on YouTube. If he wants to come on, who am I to stop him?
No, I wouldn't try to do that to you. Kip says, "Wait, what? David Carr was on DOD? He was." So the episode will probably come out, not next Monday, but the following Monday. So I ran into him at SBL and said, "Hey, I'd love to have you on the podcast." And he said, "Sure." And so I reached out to him, and today was when we recorded. So I wanted to talk about the formation of Genesis 1 through 11 book, basically digest it and kind of present it for a general viewing audience.
Yeah. Hey Jay, what's up? Jay Pasek in the chat said, "I wonder how much of Heathen Queen's curriculum is available in audio format." None of it.
Yeah, none of it.
Sorry. I mean, you could probably get the books that I read in audio format, but Chicago doesn't really broadcast their classes.
I know there are some apps that you can, programs or apps or something that will let you, that will read PDFs to you. So definitely don't go to Anna's archive, or
I definitely didn't send it to my whole class,
or libgen.is to get PDFs of all these books that we're talking about. Definitely don't do that.
Don't.
That would be a problem. So
huge problem. Don't do that. Yeah.
The Inquisitive Bible Reader says, "My copy of Reading the Fractures of Genesis is almost worn out from how much I refer to it." So that was published in 1996. That's almost 30 years old. And what's funny is we talked a little bit about how things change. And he was like, "Yeah, there are things he talks about how in his classes, he'll talk about this was old car versus new car. And he says it frustrates a lot of students who are like, "Why should we take any of this seriously if you might just change your mind?" And it's like, hey, that's the way the cookie crumbles when we're just trying to find data.
That's just the way the cookie crumbles.
Happily Heterodox says, "The idea that pre-fall man would be incapable of death is truly strange. So if he fell in a lake, he couldn't drown." I think a lot of scholars would say that the story as it stands in Genesis probably presupposes they are mortal the entire time, and that they're at no point were they immortal. The notion of the fall, as we talk about it today, is a mostly Christian invention.
Yes.
Yes.
Also, so I remember this is not really cognitive science, but something that I briefly spoke about on Facebook the other day because I just find it so interesting. Is Isaiah 14 and how this son of light or whatever it is has largely because of Origin and
Jerome.
Exactly. They really should have sat that one out. How that's become it was Satan. And it was probably actually Sargon. Maybe Sennacherib. I think the evidence is better for Sargon, but fine, we can go one or the other.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wild to me.
Yeah.
But anyway. Yeah.
Oh, that's one I got to deal with all the time. Hello, Ben Shachar. And where does that come from? And
yeah.
in fact, I'm one of the last chapters. I saved the most complex chapters of my trade book for last, so I'm writing them right now, and they're taking a lot longer than I expected them to take.
Wait, you're writing what?
A trade book.
Oh, yes.
And one of the chapters I'm working on is developments of the concept of Satan. Where does Satan come from? And I get to I'm gonna take a section to talk about how the serpent from the Garden of Eden is not Satan, and how Isaiah 14:12, Lucifer is not Satan, and how
It's
they're
not
not
even Lucifer. It's like it doesn't even like. Sorry, you know that. It's just like Lucifer was, I believe, from the Vulgate.
Yes.
Or no,
yes,
yeah, from the
that's
Vulgate.
Jerome.
No.
Yeah, that's Jerome's
Right, yeah,
rendering.
yeah.
In the Septuagint is Heosphoros, which and Lucifer and Heosphoros are both members of the Greek and the Roman pantheons.
No.
But one of the things I'm saying that's a little more controversial is that not even in the New Testament are either of them identified as Satan. And that's where people are. In fact, somebody I think on the Discord or somewhere mentioned that they're trying to look in commentaries about like Revelation 12 and 20, where it's talking about that old serpent, the dragon, Satan, and they're like, most of the commentaries are saying that's the serpent from the Garden of Eden. And I guess I need to like write an academic paper and publish it and be like, stop pretending that this is about the serpent, because it's not.
Stop.
And then
stop.
Luke 10:18 is the only one that
That's
people
the
think
one.
might refer to Lucifer. I saw Satan falling like lightning
Right,
from
well,
heaven. That's Enochic. I'm gonna argue that's Enochic. We've got stars that fall from heaven in the Enochic literature.
Yeah, I mean, okay,
Shout
sorry.
out to
There's
my
just
boy
so much.
Tiglath-Pileser III. Yeah, he gets. Why you got to leave Tiglath out?
I don't know. I mean, like I like Tiglath. So here's the thing. I love the insanity of like the Assyrian Empire. Like it's the best like drama you can find. And I wouldn't love it if I like lived there because they'd probably be dead, but or like I don't know, in a harem. But like reading about the way these people existed, it's just like it's like a telenovela. It's like the first telenovela. So I'm obsessed with like all of these kings. I think they're great. And every time I see one that's like ruled for 7 months, I'm like, that's so tough. Like you don't even get like a year name. You just like, yeah. But yeah, if you want like intrigue and drama and like some really insane torture methods, you should read about the Assyrians. Fun fact, I believe it was, who was it? The second one was Sennacherib. Was it Sennacherib? I can't ever remember. Like one of the bodies wasn't recovered, and so he sent someone after them and then had them flayed alive because they couldn't recover the body. And then took the like flayed body and like threw it basically at the city gates or something. And it was like, I mean, it's a little bit much.
Yeah.
It's a little much.
Everything okay at home?
Yeah, right. Like, are you going through something? Do you need like a hug? Just kidding. We'll find somebody else. Anyway, yeah. I spend so much time reading about long dead like royal families, but I love it because they were crazy.
Somebody asked, does anyone know where I can get a version of Naomi Wolf's translation of the Bible? Have you been following that?
No, I haven't. But someone in one of my classes the other day, we took I sat in a interbiblical exegesis seminar yesterday. Yeah, and someone in my cohort on our break started talking about Naomi Wolf, and I am so happily removed from so much of what's going on.
One of the, like, if it weren't for the insomnia and the 1-year-old with the colic and
you have a 1-year-old?
No. When I was at Oxford.
Oh, like, I was like, what?
No, if it were not for that, when I was at Oxford, that would have been the most blissful time of my life, because I was just buried in research day and night, did not have time to pay attention. I wasn't even in the right country to be paying attention to what was going on in America. It would have been just the most blissful time of my life, but except for the having to live the life. But yeah, it was. But yeah, I know what you're going through. It's nice to lose yourself. You got to lose yourself, as the great poet once said.
Yeah, no, I honestly like the longer I spend alone in like a back corner of the library, the more I never want to leave that back corner of the library. Like so much of like I have anxiety on a day-to-day basis because I'm, as I said, on a 9-week quarter and I'm prone to anxiety and something is always due. However, I don't have the anxiety from like realizing how deeply disturbed, like, and just messed up the world is in a lot of ways. Or if I do, but it's not a constant assault on my like brain. It's like I know what's going on in the world. I keep up with the news most of the time, but I'm not being constantly assaulted by people's just like absolute stupidity. Because you actually you can't just say whatever you want in the library at Chicago. You can, but you'll get kicked out. So
yeah, some of the most just sublime periods of my life were when I was in either the Radcliffe Camera at Oxford or elsewhere in the Bodleian, like the Duke Humphreys room, which or something like that, which is where they filmed the Harry Potter library scenes. Yeah, you're not even allowed to bring a pen in there. You're not supposed to. Like,
can you bring a pencil?
Pencil, yeah, you got to bring pencil. Yeah. So
what do you do? Meditate in there? Like,
yeah, like the first time I went in there, I had an old laptop and opened it up, and it was like boom, and I was everybody was glaring at me.
So funny.
We've got some questions I think I've not gotten to.
Yes, I want to make sure because we're on your schedule. I want to make sure we get to your super chats and also the questions from my counterparts. So you let me know.
Okay. Is there anything you're still wanting to review, to talk about?
Oh man, everything all the time. What are your thoughts on a community or individuals? Sorry, I'm trying to articulate this. When a people group is sort of forced to interact with a imperial, to use Mark's word, apparatus, how do you think, or like, how would you approach or explore, or however you want to phrase that, the way in which, like, the cognition around that and how that would shape one's, I guess, maybe view of reality, or like, I don't know, does that, like, maybe not reality, but like their view of themselves and what's going on around them. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, I don't think I know anything off the top of my head that.
No, that's okay then.
But I'm sure that there's been some kind of experimentation on that. I mean, most of the folks who do cognitive science of religion spend an awful lot of time in settings heavily influenced by colonialism, and so they have to have addressed that. Let me just going to do a couple of quick searches. So here's, what is this? Is this a paper? A dissertation, Generation, Status, Ethnic Identity, Colonial Mentality, and Enculturation in Filipino Americans. Okay. So there's going to be research on this. Ethnicity as cognition.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I think like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's I'm just kind of going through to see what kinds of things are.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't think I'm being particularly articulate because I'm still deeply in the like intake stage of most of what I'm doing, and I'm intaking a lot all the time. But in reading Mark's introduction, he talks about, so it's okay, well, first of all, I think I'm trying to identify in our limited corpus what I would label, or what I think I could argue is a response to Assyrian hegemony, right?
Mhm.
And I know that we have some, I mean, there's definitely places where we see language contact. In Isaiah, it's probably more Aramaicisms than Akkadian, but there's some there. So I need to identify like what it is that I think are responses in the like material, because that's really all we have. And then from there, I think start to think about like the way in which these responses, Mark puts it, the way in which these responses were inevitable given the contact and the power dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I'm looking for something a little bit more than that, which probably when I read through some of the stuff you sent me today will help me sort of frame my argument a little bit better. Because more so than just like how these responses are like inevitable, I'm wondering what cognitive like frames or lenses we can use to understand the effect of empire on a people group. Yeah, sorry, I'm not being very articulate because I'm still working through some of this in my brain.
Well, what's the end goal? What question are you trying to answer? I mean, you're still trying to gather data. Maybe you're trying to formulate the question as you go. But yeah, it's kind of a specific thing you're looking at. Here's another dissertation I just found that is more modern, but may be relevant. An examination of the relationship between ethnic identity development, cognitive complexity, differentiation of self, and reports of racial and ethnic microaggressions.
Can you put that in the chat? Because I was going to try and write it on my phone, and then it was 15 words. Or in a message or whatever. I would appreciate. I can even look it up. I
put the link to the dissertation on there.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
So,
so I guess that's the other thing is I'm still trying to figure out what the exact question is. So I know, hard to imagine. I've been like jumping around. I started off by thinking about what we could say about how, why, and when, or maybe not why, but how and when there would have been this sort of scribal contact or like interaction of the literati that would have allowed for Leviticus 25 to show up, which is the year of Jubilee is pretty clearly modeled on like the Amburaru and the Mishrarim. However, our like textual record is very sparse and we don't really fully know how it was passed down. I think a lot of it has to do with sort of social memory, maybe, and whatever. But so that's sort of where I started off. Seth Sanders sent me something that hasn't published it yet. I don't know if he's going to publish it. But talking about the Covenant Code and sort of how it kind of opens with slave laws. There's definitely, I think I was talking to Stackard about it, and I think I agree with him in that, like, he thinks it probably starts with the altar laws right before it. So basically, here's how you can make altars. Okay, also, once you've established how you can worship me, let's get to the like rules.
Yeah.
And it opens with these slave laws, which are really interesting for a number of reasons. Not the least of which being that Mesopotamian kings in the Old Babylonian period and before and after would often, when they ascended the throne, do these things, right? They would, release the slaves and forgive debt. Now, what they probably did was like release some like elites that had fallen on hard times and had to like be in slavery.
Yeah.
It wasn't a widespread thing, but like this
Right.
idea of like, I am a just king and I'm generous and like blah, blah, blah.
Well, it's like Biden standing up and saying we excuse student loans.
Yeah, right.
It's like you excuse like 5% of
and even that
of
did
my
you
principle.
because then they just like canceled it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we see it later. Like at the end of a lot of these kings' reigns, they would write their like law codes, or some of them anyway, not a lot of them, and then append it to their earlier royal edicts of manumission and all of that. And so when you're looking at the covenant code in Exodus, you see this really interesting structure where it opens with these slave laws. And instead of, and this is all coming from like Seth and other people, it's not my original idea in case anyone got any crazy ideas. But this part has been well argued in scholarship that instead of sort of like freeing slaves, what ends up happening is it creates like an extra category of slaves and then like provides a way for debt slaves who just love being a slave so much that they like want to be a slave forever. And like, here's how you can do it. And what I think what's interesting, obviously, is that like, I think anyway, that it's pretty clear this whole thing is sort of presenting Yahweh as the king, as a king. And there's a reason for that, where it's like, you guys don't need a king. No, we don't need any kings. Don't worry about it. We don't need any special fancy places to worship. You don't need like to spend a bunch of money on it. Like, it's cutting off like all of the elites and saying like, yeah, go build a dirt altar. It's fine. I'll come to you wherever you are. Here's how you should handle, slaves. And then basically just goes on and continues to use this covenant language. And so there's this interesting like thing going on where we're establishing Yahweh as like, and I think that Seth says is both the like your owner and your liberator, which is an interesting dichotomy going on there anyway.
And they're setting up Adonai as the king in a period when they didn't really have the autonomy to have their own king. And and at the same time, you're going to be all the redemption stuff from Deutero-Isaiah, for instance, is basically you were my enslaved person. You got bought by somebody else. I'm buying you back. You're now my enslaved person again. And so I think it's definitely interacting with their subordination to Assyria and to Babylon, trying to make sense of it, trying to renegotiate that relationship so they can think of themselves as being free, as having this kind of liberty that they don't really have. And then trying to make all these laws about here's how you're going to, be enslavers yourselves. We're just going to fantasize about what if we were in the
what if we had some power? Yeah. Well, and I think it's also very interesting about what you just said, where it's like they didn't really have the autonomy to be making these rules. So I don't have an answer for this necessarily, but like, okay, so they don't have the autonomy to do this, but they're doing it anyway as like an act of maybe resistance to this power that's being forced on them, which says a lot about the way they're trying to carve out their own identity. But in their carving out of their own identity, it's almost less about their identity and more about not being that identity.
In my Discord, Vishanti's saying it seems like you're circling the topic of assimilation versus distinctiveness. And there's David Graeber talks about the concept of schismogenesis,
Oh.
Which is this idea that you create identity markers as you try to distinguish yourself from others, and
Yeah,
that sounds
but
like
it
that might be a framework that. And here it's about acts of resistance that become identity markers, and you generate your identity via the act of
right,
resistance.
right. Which is interesting because then it's like, okay, well, how much of that is actually like, is that actually an identity to just be? Do you know what I mean? It's like, I guess it is an identity, but it's almost like when we tell boys, sort of, growing up, like everything they do is like just don't be like a girl. Well, it's like your identity can't be a negative here. Like there has to be something that you are. It's just not something
Yeah.
that you aren't. And I know that's not exactly what's going on here, but there's something to that. Like,
well, I think both sides of the coin get filled in along the way, because
right.
the whole don't be a girl, is you later on fill in the gaps with,
Sure,
and
yeah.
here's the things that you should be so that you are not like
Right.
this. Don't
Yeah.
play soccer. When I was in high school, soccer was a girls' sport, so you didn't play
That's
soccer.
weird.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the reasons our men's national soccer team is nowhere near as good as our women's, because for a long time we didn't want to play soccer, but
Right.
you go out and there are other sports that you play instead, and sometimes the do the one thing leads, and sometimes the don't do the one thing is what is in the driver's seat.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's definitely something there with that concept of schismogenesis.
Yeah.
Simone
I keep mulling
Bat-Yochai
this over.
says, on that note, specifically social memory, do either of you have any good recommendations for reading on primary and secondary oral cultures and oral transmission of tradition?
I'm gonna let you take that one.
I like Walter Ong is what I read in graduate school long ago. That was kind of the standard, but that's, I know, outdated. I thought Bart Ehrman's book, Jesus Before the Gospels, had some interesting stuff to talk about regarding social memory. But I was talking with one of my professors from Trinity Western last year at SBL, Tom Hattina, and he was saying that it doesn't do a great job of representing the field as it stands right now. And so he actually just published a paper in Novum Testamentum about the problems with the way New Testament scholars are using social memory. So I don't know where the field stands at the moment, but I know that social memory is something that is, I think has a lot of cool things to offer. I'm trying to remember the name of there was an edited volume on social memory in New Testament that, I'm not going to find it. And I don't remember what it is, but I think it came from the late 90s or early 2000s, so that's going to be out of date as well. Okay. Shall we get to some super chats?
Yes, and then we can hop into my
yeah,
I only have a handful from mine, so it won't be.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's get to the super chats. I'm gonna grab another soda, but I'm listening.
Go ahead. Campfire_cat, where can I access the reading list? I'm gonna try to make sure I get that posted tomorrow. I tried to, in fact, maybe hang on just a second. Maybe I have. Maybe I can edit something real quick. So I've got all my online class bibliographies posted at danielomcclellan.com, but I can just log into the admin real quick, and I can probably upload online class bibliographies, and I can just upload the reading list.
As a funny little aside, everyone I know anyway, keeps asking me, like, what are you learning? Like, wants me to, give them this really insightful earth-shattering information that I'm learning. And
Mhm.
I am learning a lot, don't get me wrong. But like, I spent the entire weekend reading articles about like an ancient relative particle in Hebrew.
Yeah.
So, and I'm still not fully clear on it. So I'm like, do you want to learn about like random particles? Then I can help. Like it's I feel like I'm in that stage. I think it was Stacker that said, you know, it's like when you're a kid and you're learning how to talk, you have this period of silence because you're sort of taking it all in and trying to figure out how to spit it out, and that's where I am.
All right.
I was supposed to like regurgitate all the cognitive science stuff to Dan, and he was going to tell me if I was right or wrong. That didn't happen exactly because it's what I've been thinking about is more like what I'm trying to think about and how I can integrate these things. So sorry.
Okay. I've got the. Okay, I'm putting a link in the comment, and that's a link to the online class bibliographies page, but the bottom file is the reading list. I need to edit it so that the preview doesn't pop up because that looks kind of annoying. But there is the reading list is on there for the time being.
Hi, Neil.
All right. Okay. Campfire_cat then asks, "Hey Queen, I'm interested in studying religion for masters. Don't have a focus yet, but is there a program you would recommend?"
It's such so I mean, yeah. The dilemma is, at least in my opinion, always the money. There is a lot of great programs. I love the program I'm in. I am doing it here at the Div School at University of Chicago. I think depending on what area you end up wanting to focus in on, you'll have more or less success finding a program, right? So like what I am interested in is quite niche, especially for a master's. So there's a pretty limited number of places that are offering what I'm looking for. If you are someone that wants to study something broader, like say religion in the Americas or something like that, you will probably have an easier time finding programs, and they won't necessarily be, you know, there's 10 in the country or something. I'm sure there's more than that for me, but master's programs are rarely well funded. PhD programs are rarely well funded. Masters less so. There are some programs that are at least partially funded. So I was really lucky. 80% of my tuition is covered here, which is like kind of unheard of in most master's programs.
Yeah.
I know there's a few other ones. Like the other thing, here's my other note. I'm doing an MA. There are programs, so like you might find programs for like an MDiv or like something like that will be fully funded. But if you're wanting to do, well, one, you're going to have to do an MDiv, so you'll have to do like the practical and all of that. But also, it's harder if you want to do PhD studies to get into that with an MDiv versus an MA. So there's a lot, sorry, I'm like rambling. There's a lot of considerations. There are a number of good programs. So like Yale's Divinity School is great. The University of Chicago is great. Harvard has a good divinity school, although I'm not sure what their degrees they offer there are. If they offer MAs, I know they have like an MTES, but I don't know what that stands for. I also applied, where was it? Brandeis has a good MA program. And they offer some funding, but not as much, like not nearly as much as, not nearly as much. Oxford has an MA program if you want to go across the pond.
And if you're talking about religion more generally, like religious studies rather than Bible.
Yes.
In particular, Alabama's is probably the best in the country right now. Russ McCutcheon has been running that program for a while, and they're doing some of the best work. And so if you're talking about religious studies in general, that's the one that I would highlight.
Yes, thank you. I am out of touch with like general religious studies. Again, I am like the deepest in the weeds that I've ever been. So forgive me for like not anyway. Hope that helps. If you have other questions or want to talk, message me separately and I'll
Jefferson Spatchcock says, I'm waiting for Dan to accidentally present a comic book as a scholarly source. Gonna be waiting for a while. I think there's not as much overlap in my mind between comic books and scholarship as some people seem to think. And then there's that question from Philip about supporting you. Nice. Do you have a Patreon or
I have one, but I never do anything on it, which
well, and some people just want to be able to support you and don't care about the incentives.
Yeah, so I have a Patreon. It's Heathen Queen. I don't do anything, like literally anything, because I don't do anything right now except sit in the back corner of the library and go to school. Yeah. I have like a Cash App and a Venmo. I feel so weird talking about this. Those are sort of the three options. My Cash App is Hello Heathens. Sorry.
Scott Duke says, for Jessica, you used to post a lot about male privilege and the patriarchy before grad school. How has your experience been since moving to Chicago?
So it hasn't gone away, if that's what you're asking. And it's definitely something that I think, we actually talk about quite a bit in academia, or not in academia, in my specific corner with my specific teachers. And I'm lucky to have professors who really care about this and talk about it and whatever. I don't really go outside very much, so I have less less encounters with the opposite sex. But yeah, I mean, it hasn't gone away. It's still there. I think I post less about everything at the moment. And I now pretty much always walk around with these bad boys on. So you could be talking to me right here and I can't hear you. But yeah, still alive, still kicking. I'm so removed from so much right now, and it's glorious. But yeah.
Got a question from Malik Mage. In the story of Elisha, is there any evidence that bears were from that area, or did they just magically appear? Thank you both for everything that you do. Well, thank you for the kind words. I'm pretty sure at the time there were probably bears. I don't think that they are around. Haven't been around for a while, but I don't think it's like something incredibly out of the ordinary, like somebody in Chicago suddenly getting mauled by a lion. Like it's not that out of the ordinary. So I think there probably had to have been something about that, but I'm not exactly sure about the flora and the fauna of that particular time period. And interestingly enough, that's David Carr's next big project. He's working on animals in
interesting.
In the Bible.
Sorry. Someone in the chat just asked how they can get in touch with me, and I can't type it because for whatever. It's my first name, JESSECA @uchicago.edu. You can send me an email there. It might take me a little bit to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
Because she's at UChicago.edu right now.
Yeah.
Doing UChicago.edu stuff.
Yeah. I love it. Don't get me wrong, but like it's nonstop.
Yeah. Dan McClellan, apologist, love him. Trademark from Vishanti. very
Put that
clearly.
on a shirt. Yeah.
The next one that everybody's telling me I need to do is my serious face, along with I'm a silly dude. Because
I'm just a silly little guy.
I don't know if you saw this video, but somebody in response to my King James version, why it's not a great translation video, they were like, Dan McClone says a lot of silly things, and this may be the most silly thing he's ever said.
Buddy.
And so my response, I just said, hey, what can I say? I'm a silly dude. And then there was like a 5-second just me glaring at the camera. Pause.
This is so good. I love this. I love Sassy Dan. I've always said this. I will die on this hill. It's my favorite.
And a lot of people who only know me from TikTok don't know that I am a goofy dude. You guys watch the podcast. I'm a silly dude. Okay. Joshua Bouchard, thank you so much. I would highly recommend becoming a Patreon member of the Data Over Dogma show. That is the other Patreon that Dan Beecher and I share for the podcast, which helps us make the podcast go, pays for an editor because neither of us want to do it. And yeah, I would highly recommend that as well. Steve Acosta, thank you so very much for generous. What do we call these things? I'm so bad at
Super chats.
Super chats. Yeah, that's what I don't have a comment other than to say that Dan McClellan freaking rocks. But thank you so much, Steve. That is very kind of you. I appreciate it. Joshua Bouchard again. Thank you for the question. What's a good book on the Assyrian?
Hold on. My computer's on it. This is a really good book written by a brilliant scholar in the field, but it's like popular level. Like it's very interesting.
Can you hold it up again?
I
couldn't see. It was too small. Oh, Eckhart.
It's called
the Rise and Fall
Assyria, the Rise and Fall. Yeah. If you want something a little more, I'm gonna go grab a book off my bookshelf. Expansive, and that's more geared towards like an intro academic class. Van de Meroop. I can't. Don't tell him. There we go. Yeah. don't. Yeah, he doesn't know me. He's never going to hear that. But sorry. A History of the Ancient Near East. Super good. Also, like easy to read. It's very much like meant as like an intro textbook to the Ancient Near East. Also, one more here. Hold on. Sorry, knocking things over here. This is also more of like a broad history of the ancient Near East. Weaver, Scribes, and Kings by Amanda Tadani, who was a member of the Bengals, founding member of the Bengals, and then decided to do academia.
As Eternal Flame Bengals, not the football team.
Correct. Yes, okay, was it Walk Like an Egyptian? Maybe is that the Bengals?
Eternal Flame is my is the Bengals song that I think about, not because that was my theme song when I was in elementary school. Because I was a sentimental little fool.
Put that on a shirt. I'm just a sentimental little fool.
I just saw. I just was looking through the text that I have that have Assyria in the title, and I don't know if you've seen this, but Abraham Faust's book, the Neo-Assyrian
It's on my bookshelf.
Empire, it's on your bookshelf. Okay, fine.
No, it's so good. No. Sorry. So I basically went into the library and I pulled like everything I could find about the Assyrian Empire, like basically, or Neo-Assyrian Empire, and how they interacted with people around them. So I also actually, this other fun book over here, and believe when I say fun, boy do I mean it. So here's Abraham Faust's book. It's not actually mine; it's the library's, but they just automatically renew it, so it's basically mine now. And there's also like imperial peripheries in the Neo-Assyrian period. This is very specific. and it's like it's an edited volume. So I don't know that if you just wanted to learn about like the Assyrian Empire, if that would necessarily be the one you want, but it's very interesting.
Okay. I bet I got one that you don't have.
Let's go. I bet you do.
Okay, from 2023, the Oxford History of the Ancient Near East, The Age of Assyria.
Yes, I don't have that.
By Radner, Moeller, and Potts.
You know what sorry, I just realized that I got, hold on. Oh, okay, I thought I lost it, and I was like, I'm gonna be so mad. Because it just came in the mail. This is not a book you should probably get, but I wanted to show Dan the Oxford Handbook of Cuneiform Culture. Yeah, that has it's by Radner and Robson, or edited by Radner
Karen
and Robson.
Radner, man,
she's awesome.
I have a PDF of that.
Yeah, I mean, I believe you.
That's a big book.
It's a big book, but it was only $25 on Amazon, and I had a gift card
for an Oxford Handbook.
I know. Well, it is paperback, but
yeah.
I don't know. I was like, I said $25. Click, add the cart. Yeah.
Okay, oh, cool. Aaron Colson's so happy to see HQ on a stream. Dan, you're all right too. I'll take it.
I'm happy to be here. I really miss doing stuff like this.
Campfire_cat asks, at what point do you consider something out of date? That's a good question. I usually, if it's more than 20 years old, I'm thinking it's probably not going to be on the vanguard. But then also, if the scholarship has kind of moved on, if the consensus has moved away from something, irrespective of how old it is, then I would probably say it's out of date. It does. Excuse me. That doesn't mean it's not worth reading, but just to take note, you have to consider that there's going to be more up-to-date stuff.
I wanted to, sorry, just jump in really quick, because I saw people in the chat talking about the Phoenicians. This book just recently came out, Phoenicians, The Making of the Mediterranean, by Carolina Lopez Ruiz, who also teaches here at Chicago, and she's great. And the book is great and easy to read. So if you are someone that's interested in the Phoenicians, excellent, excellent book. Cannot recommend it enough. Sorry, continue.
Awesome. No, that's fine. Professor Parks, PhD, thank you so much. Dan, what are your thoughts on McNeil's The Church and the Homosexual just getting in it? I think it's, as I've said many times in the past, I appreciate and support the rhetorical goals. But there's another one that's very similar in those rhetorical goals. Yeah, here we go. I've got too big a pile of books over here. Robert Noose wrote a book called Trajectories of Justice, what the Bible says about slaves, women, and homosexuality, and tries to make a similar case that the Bible does not actually condemn homosexuality. And if we're talking about the sexual orientation, I agree 100%. It doesn't even address it because they had no concept of that specific sexual orientation. Talking about same-sex intercourse, I don't think there's a good case to make that the Bible is not, to some degree, and in a small handful of passages, outright condemning it. So I think there are the scholars are trying to move into what are we going to do about it now that we do acknowledge it. And actually, there are. I was not around within Christianity back in the 90s when this came out, but Hayes, what's his first name? I know his son, Christopher B. Hayes, and Chris and his dad, I forget his first name, but the dad wrote a book back in the 90s condemning homosexuality from a biblical perspective. It was a very influential book that caused an awful lot of damage. And now he and his son are getting together on a book, and I forget what the title is, but basically he's recanting and he is arguing the Bible says this. However, the theology of the Bible suggests that God is open to revising things. And I don't know the argument that's being made, but it's basically going to argue that we need to move beyond that feature of the Bible. So that's what I would say about that. I do have one of the chapters in my trade book is going to be on what the Bible says about homosexuality. So if you'd like a longer form discussion there, look for that.
I think his name is Richard Hayes.
Richard Hayes, yeah, that's it. I'm sorry.
That's not me. Someone in the chat said it.
Yeah, I tried out for Jeopardy one time, and I just my mind just names just don't enter my mind when I'm put on the spot, and it's so embarrassing.
Me taking Hebrew tests.
Well, that was me at Oxford when I was studying under. Oh gosh, now I've forgotten his name. Steve. Steve Herring.
Steve.
Yeah. It was at one point we started off with like 3 students, and the other 2 students dropped out, so it was just me and Steve. So the classes were taking place in his office, and he would give me quizzes every couple of weeks, and he would give me verbs, and the assignment would be to parse and translate them, and I would always parse them and forget to translate them. And he was like, "Don't forget to do that you're going to forget to do that on the test, on the final. You don't want to do that. Make sure you do that." And I went and took the final and thought I just smoked it. And I still remember exactly where I was the gravel parking lot of the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies at Yarnton Manor when I froze and realized I didn't translate any of the verbs on the final.
No.
Ran to his office, and he was like, "I told you. I freaking told you." And I ended up getting 69% on the final. Now at Oxford, 70% is an A. Anything above 70 is an A. It's weird, but basically you're going to score somewhere in the 60s or 70s. Like 75 is basically an A+. And it was because I got a 69% instead of a 70 that I did not get distinction. I did not graduate with distinction. So
I would have lit myself on fire. Like that's so annoying.
Yeah,
oh my god.
It was all right. Tommy Thomas.
Sorry, it was David Barnett in the chat.
Oh, Burnett. Yeah, Dave. Thank you, Dave, for correcting my awful memory. Tommy Thomas asks, "Do you think Ehrman is old school? Not wrong, just more current scholars hip?" I think on some things, but I think he stays up to date. He just put out a brand new New Testament intro, 8th edition. He and Hugo Mendez. So he keeps up to date on a lot of stuff, and a lot of his books are he's looking at new methodological lenses and things like that. So he's trying to become not a specialist, but so he works with social memory. He works with different methodologies that he wasn't trained in as coming up. Swift C, thank you so much.
Hey
Jessica, Teenage Theologian 556. And then and then you already answered that question. Neil, the 604 Atheist. Dan, first, love your work. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Secondly, I'd like to invite you to be a guest on my show. I would be honored. The only thing is I am trying to finish 2 books and organize and then present at a conference soon. So for most requests I get, I've been saying, please contact me again after the middle of May. So you can reach out to me again, and you can email me at dan@maklelan.org. And then
my sleep paralysis demon back there.
Jesse Delk, thank you so much for the question. What are some sources for the ancient serpent in Rev 12:9 not being a reference allusion to Genesis? I'm having trouble finding a source that represents that view. SBL and ICC don't represent this view. And this is why I think I need to write a paper on it. But Rev 12:9 verse or chapter 20 talks about that ancient serpent, the dragon, and the dragon is clearly a reference to Leviathan. The dragon is, and as for ancient serpent, you can just go to Psalm 74, and we get Adonai is Mekedem of old, of the of old. You defeated Leviathan, the many-headed dragon. Isaiah 27:1 is the only place anywhere in the Bible where we have a single entity referred to as both a serpent and a dragon, and the Septuagint translation uses the same two words that Revelation 12:9 uses when it refers to the serpent and the dragon. The dragon has 7 heads, and the Leviathan has multiple heads in the biblical tradition. Isaiah 27:1 is quoting a tradition that is also found in the Baal cycle, where it refers to Leviathan as the Ugaritic cognate, refers to Leviathan as the wriggling serpent, the twisting serpent, the dragon with 7 heads. And Isaiah 27:1 says Leviathan, the wriggling serpent, Leviathan, the twisting serpent, the dragon that lives in the sea. There is absolute, there's a lot of wriggling going on in the creation of the earth. Wriggling and writhing, but like the imagery all points in the direction of Leviathan. There is nothing that would point rather in the direction of the serpent from the Garden of Eden. And there are some folks who say Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, I think verse 24, identifies the serpent because it says that, dang it, now I forgot what it says, but Wisdom of Solomon 2, New Revised Standard Version 24. Through an adversary's envy, death entered the world. And so this is supposed to be referring to the serpent, but there was an article published about 10 years ago, Journal for the Study of the Pseudepigrapha, I believe, which points out that this is an indefinite use of this word for adversary and is probably a reference to a human. And so most likely Cain is the referent here. Cain was envious of Abel. Cain introduced death into the world by killing Abel. And so, I got to write a paper on this and publish it and get these commentaries to stop giving me a hard time, because it's very clearly Leviathan.
Yeah, get on with it. What, you got other stuff to do? Kids? My family? Jeez.
Okay, speaking of which, I need to go do some dishes and put some kids to bed. But okay. I want to just get through. Yeah, this is what always happens. I spend all my time trying to catch up on.
I know, but I have to ask you the questions from Slack.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, yeah, let's get to those.
I have to do it. All right, let's see here. Not Dr. Chevelle sending me gifts in the chat. Sorry. Because I posted the question in the chat. Anyway, and so he's sending like gifts and the responses, which I just find very funny. So one, can you give a quick summary of the cognitive science of religion, which we kind of did at the beginning, but how it informs, augments, corrects, or supplements other contemporary conventional approaches to and understanding of religion?
And actually that's what I'm going to be presenting at SBL in one of our sessions. Is going to be Confessions of a Convert to the Cognitive Science of Religion. And so I'm going to talk about why I picked up Cognitive Science of Religion. I think it brings fresh lenses to old questions. And I think it helps us, at least when we're talking about the ancient world, because there is, we don't think there's an appreciable difference between our cognitive architecture and the cognitive architecture of these folks from the ancient world. We can fill in a lot of gaps. We can take that frog DNA to fill in the gaps in the dinosaur DNA. to get a better understanding of how they were thinking about these things, and how that thinking about these things led to the articulation of the things they said about God, about the world around them, about their understanding of their place in it, and all these things. So I think it helps us fill in some gaps. One, two, the dual process cognition framework, the understanding that a lot of our cognition goes on behind the scenes. We're not aware of it. We have no control over it. This kind of hydraulic back and forth between intuitive cognition and reflective cognition, I think, has so much explanatory power, and can help us identify where people are saying things because they're influenced by their intuitions. We can identify aspects of representations of deity that are more closely connected to intuitive cognition. So like anthropomorphism is more natural. That's like a more intuitive, the more intuitive side of things. And when people are not actively considering theologically correct beliefs, they tend to default back to the more intuitive beliefs. Right. So that's why people tend to talk about an omniscient, omnipresence. What is the other one? Omniscient, omnipresent, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omnipotent, immaterial, without parts, without passions. Why we talk about this deity in terms of the opposite of all of those things is because that's more cognitively natural. And so in my book, I talk about why having this understanding helps us to parse apart where folks are representing the more intuitive notions and where they're having the reflective cognition overrule the intuitive, and they're replacing the more intuitive stuff with things that support their structuring of power, with things that are a product of some kind of social convention or a social framework or something like that. So I think there's so much explanatory power, particularly in this insight of dual process cognition. And and the curse of this is that whenever I talk about this on social media, everybody's like, "You can't read my mind." It's like, no,
oh my God.
But we can do experiments, and we have been doing experiments for decades on why people talk about deity this way. And so we know that this is what's going on.
I don't think everyone should have access to the internet. Sorry. No, no, just kidding. Okay. If, and then in parentheses, like genuine if, as if I don't know the history or philosophy involved, the cognitive science of religion developed in the study of people and phenomena in the, quote, real world of, quote, time and space. How should it be best applied to A, the level of authors, editors, compilers, etc., of biblical texts, especially if and when identifying and describing these by working back from the biblical texts themselves, and when it is or can be elusive to know which part/faucets of biblical literature are reflective and which are imaginative. Now, there's also a B, but I'm going to let you work through A. Yeah.
I don't know if I remember all of A, but it sounds like it's asking me how I do what I just said. The cognitive science of religion allows.
I'm going to go with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
It's
or like maybe even good, like responsible guidelines, so we're not just like slapping things like on each other willy-nilly.
Yeah. I think what I tried to do in my dissertation was I tried to find the most up-to-date and the best research that had responded to the criticisms of the past. Like one of the things that kind of undermined a lot of earlier research in CSR was this observation that most psychological research is done on like undergrad students from what they call weird societies, which means and this is an acronym, yeah. And I don't even remember what it all stands for, but it's like white, industrial, democratic. There's a specific kind of subset of
rich.
Rich is the R, yeah.
It's the R, so it's like, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
I don't remember what the E is. Yeah, I don't remember what the E is, but and you know they. After identifying that issue, the research now has gone to great lengths to try to do more research with informants from non-weird societies. And so I think trying to make sure that the research we're using is up to date and is thorough and is responding to the issues is a big one. And then I also tried to make sure that any theories that I was imposing were established by that research. Like, we had empirical research to support this. And I tried not to stray too far from that. I tried to limit it to just a few like insights that were well established, rather than chasing down all the new theories and ideas and everything like that.
It's Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Sorry, I had to Google it, so it didn't just pop into my head. But in any event,
and I think I messed up Western as white because I
said white.
I specifically avoided using the word Western in my dissertation and in my book, and I even went out of my way to explain that. Yeah.
Yeah, I used white. That was my fault. Okay.
Real quick, I feel like you have mentioned Pete Enns on TikTok before. Definitely positive. Pete's a good dude.
Okay, so the B part of that question is, all the first part, like how should it best be applied to? The level of the characters and, quote, religious phenomena in the story worlds of biblical texts, when these are not isomorphic with our real world and need to be adjusted for their setting and emergence from literature.
I think that's why it's important that we also study it from the perspective of literary criticism and try to understand how they're representing these worlds. But I think cognitive sciences can supplement that research and help us better understand why they represent things in the literary world the way that they do. But we can't do it without the insights from literary scholars. But yeah, it's not easy, and I think I talked about ways where I didn't think we could really parse it apart, and so I tried to avoid getting too deep into the weeds with that. And I was mainly focused on concepts of deity,
right.
And so while there's a lot of that in the Bible, I wasn't like just all over the place talking about anything and everything.
Right. Okay. Last question from the man himself. Sorry. What role, if any, does the imagination play in religion?
Huge role. In fact, I would say that one of the reasons that religion, what we label religion, is possible is because of the development of human imagination, because we have to be able to imagine what we call alternative realities. And that is everything from, heaven and hell and the underworld and the afterlife to things like yesterday and tomorrow.
Right.
In CSR, anything we don't have immediate access to through our senses now is an imagined reality. And so I argue that deity concepts, the spark of deity concepts, is our hypersensitivity to agency in the world around us, but they don't go anywhere and they don't persevere if they just stay on that level of individual intuitive cognition. They have to be captured and preserved and elaborated on, and that requires imagination. That's where we take our understanding of our sociality and we project it onto this alternative reality and think about, well, what are these other entities doing, these unseen agents, as I call them in the book? How do they live? How do they look? How do they interact with each other? How big are they? How long do they live? All these kinds of things are all products of imagination. And so I argue in the book that the development of human speech and human imagination are the two things that kind of broke the dam of human sociality, pro-sociality, and then the development of deity concepts. And I could go on for hours about this, which nobody wants.
I mean, some of us do. Also, I really need at some point for you and Dr. Chevelle to meet each other, because I feel like you would just have like the best conversation ever. Just want to listen to it. Yeah. He's huge. I mean, he's like the literary, I don't know this, but he is huge on reading the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, because that's what he does, as literature in many ways. And so he uses a lot of literary theory, including in biblical law. But anyway.
want to pull up another thing. MJR Schneider says, I read S.J. Barnett's Enlightenment and Religion at your recommendation. I'd say he agrees with Tom Holland since he claims that the main agents of religious change in the 1700s were dissenting Christians and not deists. I would have to revisit Barnett's book to look at what these dissenting Christians were acting on, because just because someone is a Christian does not necessarily mean they're being motivated by the Bible or a specific feature of Christian tradition that goes all the way back. But thank you for following up on that. And I will definitely revisit Barnett's book and see what the discussion is there. I think there were a lot of influences, and I think the line between Christianity and deism there was pretty thin as well. I'm not saying that explains things away, but I'm curious about that. So I'll take a look at that. But thank you again for following up. Okay. I've got to go now. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time and for your attention. Thank you, Jessica, for joining me, for taking time out of your very busy schedule. And
no, this is super helpful. And I'm sorry that what I told Dan was like, let me come and explain what I think I'm reading in these articles. And instead, I just sort of stumbled around my own thought processes. So thank you.
Absolutely. Always happy to help. Thank you for everybody in the chat. Hope you have a wonderful evening. What is today? Is it Thursday?
Thursday.
Okay. So tomorrow's Friday. And happy Friday, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. And
you as well.
I think I am. Yeah, those in the Patreon and the Discord, I'm doing a private live on Sunday. So yeah, so if you want to get on that, it'll be a much smaller discussion, and I'm able to keep up with the comments. Okay, I hear rumblings outside my office door, so I'm going to go now. Thank you, everybody. Again. Have a wonderful evening, and get back to work.
I will. All right.
All right.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
See y'all. Bye.